Okay, welcome everybody to October's Inner Circle. Hope everybody's doing well. Before we look at the case study, and because we've got a couple of newbies, or one newbie today, one newbie and somebody who's returned from who hasn't been with us for a while. We'll just do a quick round robin. Who you are, who you help. So who do you focus on helping, and what's going on in your world at the minute? And we'll start with Asari. Asari, tell us about what's going on in your world.
Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very busy just working with business owners, large and small, who taking them through the whole COVID situation. Most people are pivoting their businesses at the moment. Either it's marketing changes, goal changes. There's normally some kind of change. Not many people are just carrying on as they are. I know some of the trades, I think, are more or less feeling it similar to how it was. But apart from the trades, most people have had to do some significant changes to how they run their businesses. And we've managed to get some really good results for people as long as they're just focused and making that pivot. So still doing some free webinars, but nowhere as many as I was doing. I was doing about 4 a week at one point, and when we first went into lockdown. And now I do about 1 a month, or back to how I used to, just occasionally. And business planning sessions, that seems to be very popular as well. People who really just want to rethink what they're doing. So we do it 1-to-1 for about 3 hours or so, and just rethink where they're going, what they're doing. And that might be more focused on marketing or something like that, or combination.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, I know you deal with the business side specifically, but certainly on the financial planning side, the amount of demand we've had from people who've spent this time thinking about what's next and trying to get to grips with the changes they want to make over the next 10 years is really interesting. So yeah. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Non-data Ian with the extra eye, tell us a bit about what's going on in your life.
Hi, my name's Ian Wansell. Hi. Army first career, came into law, and I've been a private client solicitor about 25 years, mainly practicing the home counties. And then just before COVID, I decided to do something I wanted to do for a long time, set up by myself. So I set up a wills and estate planning consultancy based in my hometown of Wendover in Buckinghamshire. What I do is I deal particularly with wills, estate planning, later life, succession planning, cross-generational planning, business owners particularly about planning for succession, talk more later, and powers of attorney, etc. I'm a member of STEP, which are the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners, which is a specialist body in this line of work. I'm also very keen with getting involved with the military. I just started doing that. So I'm beginning to give some free wills estate planning clinics on site, on bases, some free briefings. And I see Sharon, I've just got my Armed Forces Covenant as well, actually. Got a chat with her. Right. Yeah, and well, we're very close to other professionals, other particularly financial advisors, accountants, looking what more can we do for our clients.
Amazing. Yeah, because Sharon, that's one of your particular niches as well, isn't it? So I think there's probably plenty that you two can talk about. So that'd be good. And on that particular note, should we go straight to Sharon?
Okay, so I'm Sharon from Argus Accounting. I've also set up Argus Accounting mid-COVID. 20 years of experience in the accounting world, and basically decided I don't like the way they work. I don't like filling in timesheets. I want to do things my way and add that extra special bit of whatever I can add to my clients' businesses. So I'm a proactive individual. I want to really drive my clients' businesses forward, budgets, forecasts, cash flows, what-if scenarios. I've done so many what-if scenarios, and just push this business forward in any way we can so they understand their numbers and they can see the direction they need to go. And as you say, exit planning, which I've been doing a lot of.
We'll talk about this that as part of the case study. That'd be good. Demi, do you want to share what's going on in your world?
Of course. Good afternoon. I'm an IFA. Been practicing for 37 years, and one of the Cervello team. I'm also a commercial finance broker, so I do get involved with a lot of small to medium-sized business owners and directors. The case study is particularly interesting one this month.
I thought you might like it, Deb.
There's a few questions that come out of it, but anyway, we'll get there. We'll get there. This time, as a couple of people have alluded to, small businesses are having to very carefully reflect and consider the way forward. So there's opportunities to engage, and I continue to market using primarily referral and recommendation, and also getting to grips with social media, which has been quite interesting and quite productive. I also am a youth coach mentor, and that speaks to the kind of way I deliver to my clients in financial services. And as you would imagine, after nearly 40 years, I've got an extensive network. All my connections tend to go back a long way. And that can be very helpful to the clients where they've got a situation where clearly I'm not going to have all the answers, and we'll bring in someone that I trust from my network to help deliver. That's me.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. Stephen Silva, hello mate. I saw you sneak in there, so let's go with you next.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
sorry, mate.
I haven't seen the case study either, so I do apologise for that.
Have you got a copy or not?
No.
Can you get a copy of Steve
If
Silva?
you can, I'd appreciate
Yeah, we'll get over
that.
now.
But no, same with Ian, same with Sharon, same with them. Really, you know, I'm employed for nearly 50 years, and now I'm self-employed. The great thing about it is not having to do time recording or anything like that. I'm not answerable to anyone. But if you don't know me, I deal with insolvency matters. I've worked with licensed insolvency practitioners for over 40 years. And to give you some example, literally 10 minutes ago, that's why I'm late here, I get an email from an accountant contact. I've built up a lot of accountancy database friends and business acquaintances over many years. And he's got here, hello, Stephen, hope you're well. Please find enclosed the draft accounts as we discussed last week. Can you please have a chat? Can we have a chat to wind up this company as soon as possible and discuss the costs? And the company seems to have ceased trading quite some time ago, but surprise, surprise, it's spent its bounce bank loan. So on the balance sheet, it's a £50,000 creditor as a bounce, and the other, there's £53,000 of other creditors. So we've got a £96,000 deficiency and maybe £5,000 in the bank. That's what I have to deal with at the moment. I am
and cease trading. No?
Yeah, they cease trading, but you know, it'd be interesting. You know, it's no good just sending me that. There's a number of questions that need to be asked about how it's been spent, and so forth. There is a direct.
I've got some questions on that, but we'll cover it up when we talk about the case study. But thanks for sharing that, Steve. Really appreciate it. Data, Ian. I think that's going to stick, to be honest. I really like that. Tell us a little bit about you and your business.
So I have a business consultancy. It's been running for 3 years. Last week, actually, I had the 3rd anniversary of it. So obviously difficult times at the moment. And I'm not going to play COVID bingo, but yeah, things are looking interesting as to how we're going to move on. So I've been creating a couple of ways in which people can budget easier so that they can afford to spend time and talk about change and compliance in particular, and also about structural and strategic reviews. And as we kind of mentioned just a little while ago, I've also released a brand new series of webinars, 30-minute webinars about data protection, which is one of those important important compliance matters of the moment. There's been 2 law changes in September that will affect us going forward. One hopefully for a very little time, but one will be around for a long time to come in the future. Okay,
that's great. And I think Laura's lost her connection. So product, we haven't done you yet, have we? So product, tell us about what's going on in your world, mate.
You'll have to excuse me if I become robotic, because I think my Wi-Fi is a little intermittent. So if I freeze, I'm pretending to be a statue. Right, Pradeep Mystery. I run a practice called Life's Mystery. You won't forget that in a rush. My clients are pretty much all the ones I'm seeing here, apart from Chris. He's got white hair, but he still fits the bill. It's a gray head, silver head, or no hair. And these usually are clients pretty much similar to your background, which is either coming from a corporate life into later life. And later life is reshaped with either you want to continue with your skills and knowledge or do totally something different. So it's an ideal opportunity, and particularly with the COVID situation at the moment, there's a lot of people who are actually rethinking their lives options, where they can't go back to their familiar way of living. They're thinking ahead, what next? And it's something that Chris mentioned earlier, thinking about what next in the next 5 years to 10 years, what would they like to achieve? Either run a business or go and do totally something different. Options are limited nowadays, because whereas you could go on fancy cruises for long periods, go globetrotting, all these have come to an abrupt stop now. So, we're talking about staycation, but then when you think about it, what's been announced recently, we can't even go up in north because of tier 3 lockdowns. So, our movements, our freedoms are being constricted practically on a daily basis. And it's opening up a huge amount of issues with people, how to handle it, mental health is being affected, and also their physical health as well. So it's affecting every aspect of their lives. So I guide them through in a holistic way, addressing each one of them, because they all have interconnected effect on themselves. So yeah, certainly, I'd like to talk to some of the people I haven't spoken here. We do have something in common, particularly the backgrounds you come from and where you're heading. So excited about the case again, Chris. Thank you very much for giving me something to chew into and bite into. So looking forward to contributing to that.
I do work hand Friday. I always make sure that everybody's sort of included in, hopefully in a productive way. Hi everybody. I think I know everybody on the call, but my name's Chris Dames. I run a business called Cervello Financial Planning. We've certainly I've been busy over the last 4 to 6 weeks with new client intake coming in. And those clients who are wondering what happens next and thinking about it. And funny enough, Friday, I had another client from Fords come in and see me. I know we've spoken about the fact that Fords are going through a bit of a transition in terms of their senior management at the minute. And we got another referral from Fords, and this was probably about 6 to 8 weeks ago. And we started doing the work with him, and then realised that the issues that we're seeing time and time again are similar. So what we did is publish a white paper called "What Happens Next," and that went out, or that's actually going out tomorrow to all of the survey participants. So we did some research on the white paper. And everybody who's asked for it, and there's about 200 people it's going out to, 200, 300 people it's going out to tomorrow. You're probably on that list as one of our professional partners, but if you don't get a copy, can I ask you to get in touch with Russ or Hervé, because I'd love your feedback. What I'd like to know is what you actually think of the white paper. The feedback we've had up to this point has been pretty good. We share one of the tools that we use with our clients to help them make that transition, not only with their money, but also with other aspects of their general well-being. And I'd love for you guys to take a look. Let us know what we've missed, because there's always something that you can add, but also just tell us what you think. So. Yeah, likely it's going to hit your inbox tomorrow. If it doesn't, let us know, and we'll make sure we get you over a copy to do that. But certainly agree with it, what everybody's been saying. It's a time of transition at the minute. It's a time of change, and certainly we're going to be in a position where helping our clients through that time of change is how we're going to help in the range of ways that we do it. So looking at the case study for October, let's have a quick run through. So we've got Mike, Rick, Viv and Neil, met at university, opened a TV production company. They typically take out about £150,000 each and pay in about £40,000 going into their pensions. And then 110K they split between salary and dividends. But COVID's hit them. They're in a position where commissions from program makers have gone down significantly, but they still get the income from streaming services and sales of merchandise and stuff like that. They've got some challenges as a business, though, because a lot of their employees in their new production team aren't working at full capacity and certainly not at full revenue. Mike's married with 2 adult children. Rick's single, but he's caring for his mum. And he's part of that ever-growing sandwich generation of individuals who have got kids, but also have got mum. Rick hasn't got any kids in this case study. And Viv and Neil were married, got 1 child aged 16, and looking at what's next in their life. Recently, Mike suffered from coronavirus, and unfortunately, we've had a couple of clients who've gone through the same experience. And he realised that his business isn't protected, so he wants to look at that. They've got premises in town, and they're wondering whether they need it anymore. So it's a significant expense to the business. Yeah, so they're looking at that. And they're also wondering how the business looks in whatever the new normal is going into 2021, 2022 and beyond, not only for the business as a company, but them as individuals. So what do we need to do to think about what more do we need to know? What questions do we need to ask to help the directors of YO make the right decisions? And on this one, I'll start with Sharon.
Mute button won't work. Done it now. Okay, so questions I have is, what is their exit plan? There doesn't seem to be one. They seem to be going in different directions, the 4 of them. We've got Rick, who doesn't seem to have a successor if they're planning on handing to family. There's 2 adult children. Are they interested in the business? Lots of questions, I'm afraid. Are they looking to step in? What have they done on preparing for exit? Because they're coming to a point where then you would expect this business to be going through a transition period almost. Of where are they looking to go? What are they doing about preparing for exit?
Yeah.
What were the other questions I scrolled down? Oh yeah, the office and the overhead costs. Yeah, I ditched the office personally. Everybody's ditching the office these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I've got a couple of corporate clients, and we don't get involved in the accountancy side, but they're stuck in leases currently that are a bit more longer term. But I think the market's ripe for negotiation at the minute, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think London property market, we had this conversation with a group of us the other day, is going to change incredibly. I think we're going to find an awful lot of office buildings being repurposed into residential places. It's going to be a different world because nobody's going to want office space in central London at the price that they've currently been paying. A, because they don't need it, and B, because they no longer have to pay that rent. There's going to be a wealth of office space that is going to be cheaper because they can do it.
I had a conversation with one of my clients who's a senior guy in the business in town. They reckon that they've had a bit of a drop in productivity since everybody's been working from home. But he said to me, Chris, if I'm seeing a 5% drop in productivity, but I'm paying an extra 2 million in rent, do you know, can I afford that slight drop with the definite saving of knowing that I'm in a position where I save? And it's difficult, isn't it?
There are pros and cons to that, because the other thing that's got to be considered, if people are withdrawing from office altogether, is employee mental health. working on your own, isolated at home, it's a lonely place. It's not always an ideal place. And for some employees, they relish it and they don't want to go back into the office. And you've got this split team, and others are saying, get me out of here, get me back into the office.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Balancing it.
So I suppose the other question that you've raised is you've got 4 directors, each with competing personal ambitions. What questions would you ask, and how would you manage that potential conflict?
So I think you've almost got to have an individual conversation with each of them and ask them where they want to go. So when I start working with a client, my starting point is always, where do they want to go? And that's got to be the starting point here. Are they all looking to exit at the same time? Are they looking at staggered? Do they have somebody is the business in a position for them all to exit at the same time? Who takes over running of the business? Is there anybody else who takes the reins within the business? Do they look for a buyer? There's so many questions.
Do they want to exit? Because some of them might, some of them might not.
Might not, absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. Right, any other questions?
No, I think that's plenty for me.
Okay. Data, Ian, what were your thoughts?
So yeah, along the same lines as Sharon, in terms of, what were they collectively and individually thinking about in terms of exit. But again, one of the things that I'd like to do now is to get someone in to do evaluation of the business, so they know more about what a sale of the business might net them, because that can very often help to sharpen someone's answers. And by the way, Chris, this is one of the first 1980s references I've got straight off the bat. It's poor. So I'm now going to pick up on all of the office-based stuff, really, because in any environment, if you are allowing your staff to work from home, you cannot walk away from the compliance side of that workstation. So you have to make sure that they are fully compliant no matter where they are, if they are working on through a contract with you.
Yeah.
Which also means that if you've got someone in a house share, they can be a little bit more prescriptive as to what protection needs to be in place, so that data that shouldn't go outside of the company certainly doesn't.
I mean, that raises a really interesting point, and it goes back to a point Sharon was making. Some people haven't got the home environment to work from home, have they?
No.
Either where it comes from, like data security or whatever it might be, having the environment is an interesting one. What extra risks does that bring, having that sort of?
Again, it depends on many factors, one of which is the IT framework.
Yeah.
If you're able to provide them with a company device that's got direct access via a secure link, you're not going to have an awful lot more risk in terms of doing the company work. It's more going to be about what people see or hear over your shoulder.
Okay.
I mean, how many people, when they're on a train home from work pre-COVID, would be reading out their credit card details over the phone because you want to get something now?
Yeah.
You wouldn't. You just wouldn't. And it's the same principle. You don't do stuff like that with customers' data when you're in any public place. It's one of the reasons I've not gone into one of these shared office spaces. It's my risk appetite and my ethos that drives my business.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to be seen doing something that I talk about as being, in one sense, unprofessional. So, so no, office space, I think there's going to be a need for something, but certainly where their office space is, how they're going to use it is obviously reasonably large because of the number of employees they have. But also this 20-person team, 20 is a very magic number in terms of redundancy. And then you've got a whole load of data issues to contend with the processing of that team's data when you consider which one of that 20 might be made redundant. So there's an awful lot of considerations on that side. And again, particularly if these guys are having to work the way out from the bottom of the pile, as it were, and trudge through all the little piece of information before they make their final decisions. How the new office space will look, again, risk assessments, make sure that entry can be contactless, that all of the correct signage is there. They're not in hospitality, so there's no legal requirement for track and trace, but it's obviously going to be good to take attendance to make sure that they know who is where and communicate once information becomes known. So there's a lot of responsibility on these guys if they do want to repopulate the office.
Yeah, understand that. That's fine. Thanks, Ian. Really appreciate that. Asari, what were your questions that you'd want to ask these 4 directors?
Yeah, it's good, interesting. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see a number of things, which obviously is where they want to go. We call it realigning them, which is basically aligning them with their business and their personal objectives, what they want to achieve.
Yeah.
It looks like if they've been running the business for 35 years, they must be all thinking about what they want to do next or retiring.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting just to know things like, you know, if they've been earning that kind of money, I mean, they've been earning some really good money for that long and putting that amount of money into a pension, that have they got a really nice pension sitting there? I mean, they could only be doing it 2 years or something, but if they've been doing it for years, they must have a nice pension pot. You said the property's leased, so they haven't got any asset there. And basically, yeah, where they want to go, because it sounds like the company is going to go through a very difficult stage. It's kind of something I'm predicting a bit as well, which is there'll be some people that will think, you know what, I've been through 3 recessions. I'm 65. Do I want to take this business and fight on for the next year with the possibility that we might rebuild, we might not? Is it worth the headache? I'm 65. I might as well just pack it in now. And is there some younger people who are a bit hungrier than me? Maybe the staff themselves, they might want to take it forward, and I don't need a great amount of money from the business, but it'd be nice to see the employees get something out of it. And I'll say thank you, very good, and good night kind of thing. Or I might take some kind of soft role in it, because I can't see, well, it depends obviously on personalities, but I can imagine, you know, if the business has really been hit that badly, why would you want to struggle on for the next 2 or 3 years to rebuild it if you could walk away with some nice, and you got a nice income?
I mean, yeah, I suppose the other interesting thing about this case study is that they've got a recurring income asset and a new business asset. So effectively their production stuff is all new business, but they've also got this licensing arrangement that then
which could be nice for somebody.
Could be.
Or if they would still get that money, if they didn't do anything, then, you know, rather than sell it to somebody and they try and build it, you've got another option to say, look, if we walked away, we're still going to get that 50% income if we just sat at home. So is that enough for us? But then obviously you've got the sort of moral side of saying, do we just shaft the staff and say, well, tough luck, we're done.
That's
in
the challenge, isn't it?
So it's kind of a challenge of that moral argument of saying, do we try and look after the staff? Is there an option where they could keep employment? So that's always the dilemma there. If you're really cruel, you just shut the whole thing down and say good night and we're all right. But that would be a bit a bit brutal.
Bit mercenary, mate. Bit mercenary, but I suppose they've got a bunch of options, so they could potentially sell it to the employees that stay.
Yeah.
Using an EOT, like employee ownership trust, they could potentially sell it to a competitor, but having the licensing element as the bulk.
Yeah.
they could have a transition plan over the longer term. You know, there's a bunch of stuff they could do. They could carry on running it, but take a less active step if they're not creating new stuff. So yeah. So how would you help them? How would you help them engineer to have those sort of conversations?
Yeah, I mean, it's partly. I mean, I'd love to speak to Sharon, but probably speak to somebody like Sharon or an accountant about doing some modelling with them. I mean, I can do some cash flow forecasting, but some modelling that we can look at. You know, what are we talking about income wise? Is it realistic? How much effort are we going to have to put in to get this business back up and running? And is it viable? So what is that passive income? And how much work we got to put in? Is there really long-term opportunities for these staff? And is it worth fighting for? It's that kind of scenario building to say, look, are we talking 12 months? Because I can't say I'm assuming, but they could have been furloughed. So they might not have taken a big hit yet. They could be only a small hit if they're all being furloughed. But then there's some big decisions that got to be made in the next few months as to who's going to pick up the tab for these staff if they're not earning anything. So it's that kind of modeling really to say, what do they really want? And if they don't want to make a decision about where they're going, I think the modeling kind of will force their hand, because it's kind of like dealing with reality, isn't it? The reality is cash is going to drop off a cliff and income isn't coming in. So somewhere or the other, you're going to have to make some decision about what you're going to do.
I mean, effectively, it's the same as what we do on the private client side. The money in the bank, your assets are going to last this long if this is the continued trend, you know, and have that open and honest conversation with them. Then the element that I'd add would be, I'd argue that you can't have that without looking at what they want to do personally first, and also, as you say, their personal assets and what they can rely on, because that sort of informs the business decisions to a certain extent. So yeah. What key questions do you think that you'd need to ask to get the response you need?
Yeah, so it is asking those questions about, as I said, where do they want to be individually? So it'd be nice to have a short chat with each of them, and then maybe get them together and say, you know, when's the last time we have sort of looked at what people want to do, who wants to retire, who wants to do what is their positions, and we can come to some kind of collective view about where we want to go. So those are the kind of questions I really want to ask. I think some of them you might have to ask privately, and then some could probably be asked in a group situation where we say, look, let's all have those personal conversations, then let's come back as a group and maybe have a brainstorming session around what are the options, and maybe get people like yourself. You know, it's almost like this, get a few experts in the room and say, 100%. What are our options? And we all chip in and say, you know, let's have a whole day out putting in the options on the table so they can really think what they are, and then maybe reconvene again in a few weeks' time to say they've thought about it and this is what they're thinking of where they want to go.
I think you've raised a really interesting point. It'd be interesting in terms of what everybody else thinks about this. We're doing some work at the minute, and Sharon talked about that onboarding process. We're doing some work at the minute where we're saying to clients, I don't want you to make decisions on this particular point immediately. I actually want you to think about it and give yourself a bit of breathing space so that you don't feel pressured to make a particular decision. Because these are life-changing decisions potentially, aren't they? So,
absolutely.
So giving somebody the space to say, look, don't rush. We're here when you need us, but you know, let's have a bit of an ongoing dialogue. What just opening that up on that particular point? What are everybody else's thoughts on that?
I think one of the other things.
Just make sure. Sorry, the old saying: get your ducks lined up in a row first of all. So, particularly if you're looking at retiring, the things like sort of business property relief for inheritance tax purposes. What is it you want to do? Just before you rush into it, speak to your accountant particularly. So have a look at what are your plans, what's the best way of structuring it, but always just don't rush into it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Steve. Yeah, was there anybody else who wanted to? Steve, what was you going to say?
Yes, I'd like to. I think so, Steve.
Obviously, I haven't had a quick chance to look at this case study at all, but the same things happened to the last meeting we had of the Inner Circle. Is very similar, and I agree with a lot of people that, you know, there's too many questions, to be honest. Unless you've got some up-to-date management accounts, you need to know who the key workers are. You know, the directors will know who their key employees are. if you're looking at a management buyout, which ones would you approach as far as the firm is concerned and so forth? You need to know the cost of redundancy, how many people you would need to be made redundant. You need to look at if there's any directors' loan accounts within the company. I'd like to know more details about the lease. You know, for all, I don't know what the position is with the landlord and so forth, whether they're questioning whether they need the property or not. But, you know, I don't know whether there's any personal guarantees attached to that. There are so many questions. As far as the bank is concerned, I don't know whether the bank has any charge or debenture over the assets of the business. But yeah, I would certainly consider a management buyout, transfer of the business and its assets. But obviously, I think it was Ian raised the subject of valuation of it, because I'm going through one literally as we speak. I'm waiting for the agent has been sent to this premises to look at all the finance agreements, the valuations of the chattels and things like that, because that's going to be transferred into Nuco. I've got a lawyer involved in drafting the transfer of sale purchase agreement and so forth. So, you know, there's a lot here to question the directors with.
No, that's fine. Friday, to just share your thoughts.
Yes, I'd love to. All of the questions that have been asked are pretty much valid, very crucial. But I'd take them sort of at a higher perspective of, 35 years of running a business has been, a way of life for them. And to change over from that, like you said, life-changing decisions have to be made carefully. Now, numbers and policies or decisions are nuts and bolts of it. But what I'd like to be talking to them about is, some of the personal things, their personal journeys. What have they been able to achieve in that 35 years personally, not just in terms of context of business, but in life itself. We got somebody like Rick who's remained single all his life. Obviously, that's a lifestyle choices. You've got Mike who's married. You've got Viv and Neil who've got an adopted child. And they're like all of us here around the table, or rather the screen really. We're of a similar age range. And it's crucial at this point in time, and particularly now that we've got COVID, to have a think about your journey so far. And then the step forward next is going to be life-changing. And the decision you make today is going to have an impact on your well-being and your lifestyle that you lead forward. So I'd really like to talk to a lot of the older guys, actually, because we've got Mike. We don't know what age he is yet. Maybe if they've been with each other 35 years, then maybe they're in the similar 60s or approaching that age. You mentioned that Mike had been through COVID. He had COVID. Now, COVID, as everybody or anybody who's been through it, it's not 100% recovery. There is a percentage that's still not quite right. And when you mentioned that he had serious health, how could that deteriorate in a short space of time if he's not taken care of? So again, he has to consider what steps he has to take to maintain his health and maybe perhaps improve it. Talking about Rick, he's got life-changing decisions to make and they're on the horizon. He could become a full-time carer. He's talking about the finance and affordability for putting his mother into a care home. So again, he has to think about his own lifestyle. What does he want to do? Does he want to become a full-time carer? Can he afford it? Or, what else that has he missed out in his life being a single person? What would he like to do now? Would he like to form for a relationship moving forward, just to have a fulfilling life? Then we go Viv and Neil. In fact, they're at the right place, and you mentioned that they're actually thinking about the next stage in their life. I'd like to know what have they actually thought about so far, because there's a huge amount to think about moving forward, because the next 5 years, anything could happen. It could be something that's unthought of or not decided yet, is to have a sense of clarity in the first place, and then maybe project themselves. Maybe this is an opportunity to start fulfilling their aspirations. Talking about the exit out of the current business, you mentioned Viv is having difficulty talking to Rick and Mike about the potential exit. Now, again, if Neil is able to talk to them frankly, then I think he should initiate the conversations about what their thoughts are about moving forward. And likewise, being honest about it, to say, what do you want to do moving forward? And then you accommodate each other in the decision-making process. So it is all collective decision-making, but initially, individually, what their aspirations are that they would like to meet. So, I mean, these are just some of the questions that I'd like to ask, but then moving forward, there are other things that I'd like to know. But certainly, I think if they have a sense of clarity of what they want to do, all the other nuts and bolts that you guys are offering could fall into place, because now they have a sense of direction.
Cool. Thanks, Brother. That's really useful. Demi, share your thoughts, please, mate.
Okay, well, in true CII fashion, there's a couple of anomalies in the case study. I mean, I think we're all under the assumption, and possibly rightly so, that it is a limited company. However, there is partners mentioned in one of the paragraphs.
Yeah, assume that's directors.
And there isn't the name of the limited company there. It says firm. So just to first principles, I'd want to be understanding the structure of the business, which leads directly on to why after 35 years they haven't got any kind of shareholders or directors agreements in place. And I think then swiftly moving to the one thing that stuck out for me was the valuation, because there maybe needs some motivation around any particular path they end up going down. I think they need some grassroots information, valuation, direction of travel of the industry. I was speaking to a client this morning that's in a particular industry who's just sold up because they can see some of the market markers in that sector are going the wrong way in terms of multiples. And in actual fact, they haven't exited the sector. They've just cashed in their chips.
Yeah.
So I think a meeting with the four directors to discuss some of these matters in time, instruct evaluation, perhaps in the next month or two. There need to be some preamble work done before we just gun off and get evaluation. But certainly some groundwork to understand what it is they're working with, and begin to incorporate where they see themselves as individuals. This has been mentioned already. And then other things, because I agree with everything everyone said, other things like, is there any emergent staff within the business, any employees that could be part of any succession plan? But of course, you've got to get the four directors, and I mean, they're a bit vulnerable without this directors agreement, shareholders agreement. They're potentially running on sand. So those would be some of the things I'd want to pin down, as well as using that time to start understanding the motivations, the softer side, perhaps as Pradeep has been saying, where are the soft sides going to influence what ultimately they might want to do. But there's some worrying emissions. There's some worrying emissions there at the moment. They're living on, a bit of a risky area. They haven't done the things that they really should have done.
Yeah, agreed. Structurally, and the thinking about what their future looks like as well. That soft and hard. There's elements that I think there's gaps there.
Structure going forward as well needs consideration, because if there's going to be changes, now's the time to make those plans, to think about what we need to do to get this position in the business, or to get the business in a position, rather, to take it to where its next step is for them as well. But for the business, do we need to consider the business structure? Do some things have to change there?
Yeah, potentially. Is it worth, and again, this is probably a bit more longer term, but is it worth thinking about who's going to run the business if they decide to go down that route? And do we give shares to other people? Because potentially that might be an option they might want to look at. Ian, talk to me about where you'd go with the sort of legal side. Wills, PLAs, what are you looking at?
Yeah, just so everybody else knows, I'm not a commercial lawyer, I just do private client law. I think there's a few angles here. First of all, as a group, as Stephen mentioned just now about the structure, is a lot of, first of all, what do they want to happen to their shares in the business after died? A lot of people I have will say, I want to leave my shares to my wife, but she's not involved with the business. What do the articles say? And so we need to, first of all, check what the articles say, transmission of shares, because in many cases, the directors have to offer their shares to other directors to purchase, so Fan will get the process of sale and not the shares in the business. And in that case, how are co-directors going to pay for it? Have they got cross options? Have they got shareholder agreements, key man insurance, things like that? The next one is, it's been touched, I think, with Mike, lasting powers of attorney. Is I always talk about powers of attorney to all my clients, whatever age they are anyway. You know, the will, they've passed away, power of attorney, they're alive and need assistance. But the only time I tend to recommend having restrictions in the power of attorney are for these. For business owners, where if, for example, Mike's married, if he's done a lasting power of attorney appointing his wife, would he or his co-directors want her to be involved in the business, which he never has been?
Yeah, gotcha.
Probably not. So you have a restriction there and appoint what are called commercial LPAs. And so the directors have a financial powers of attorney, lasting power of attorney, appointing each other as their attorneys, but restricted only in dealing with YO Productions. And then their normal LPA, appointing family, everything, they can deal with everything apart from dealing with YO Productions. So it works together.
Yeah.
We used to do that with enduring power of attorney as well, where in partnerships, law firms, directors, where you wanted, if you weren't able to sign some forms yourself, your co-directors could. So that's sort of general thing for them as a group. Individually, there's quite a lot there. Individually, with Rick, quite a few questions there, partly to do with mum. Where is she living? First of all, he's caring for her, but we're referring to them both having properties. So first of all, where is she living? Does she have a will? Fairly crucial. And also, very importantly, powers of attorney. We're talking about him wanting to use her money to pay for care fees. Well, he can't, unless he's got power of attorney.
Yeah,
So if you haven't
gotcha.
got a power of attorney appointed, it will be a question of applying for deputyship, which can take several months, is costly, ongoing annual charges, and it's more restrictive. So the bottom line is her health is deteriorating, but the question is, does she have mental capacity?
Yeah.
Which is quite a difficult one to gauge, actually. I'll quite often have people saying, mum's got early dementia, can she do something? Well, chances are she may be able to, she may not. Let's find out first, speak to doctors. But if we can get a power of attorney in place first of all, then she can appoint Rick, for example, to look after financial affairs, look after the being able to sell a house, and also health and welfare, which is crucial because particularly with COVID, I've found personally actually, is if you've got somebody in a care home, the care home advisors have to know who they can speak to, be authorised to make decisions about DNR and so forth. So that's really important. With the powers of attorney, it covers all of them really, but with the powers of attorney, I tend to offer or recommend to have some extra powers as well. And one's particularly important with Rick's mum, authorising the attorney to instruct investment advisor like she could herself, and to be able to use discretionary management schemes. And things like that you'd cover with him. Also, depending what assets mum's got, we look about inheritance tax as well. So we're just about mum. I'm second guessing there was dad and they're married and he's died before. We don't know. But let's find out what happened when dad died. Did he leave everything to his wife? So we've got transferable allowances, those sort of things to consider. And that's just mum. With Rick himself, again, wills, powers of attorney, the will as what does he want to do with his business? Has he got any other family who want to benefit? Is it family? Is it charities, friends? Power of attorney, particularly as a single person. If something happens to him, he's got major problems. So that's just a starting point with him. With Vic and Neil, sorry, they've got an adopted child, and they're probably more than well aware that for the terms of like wills, children include adopted children. And so if you just said to my children, it covers him or her anyway, just steps aren't covered. But because the child's 16, I think the most important thing for them is guardians. Have they already appointed guardians for the child? And if not, I always recommend clients do it in writing now, so at least you've got it in place. We'll cover it in the will as well. Again, wills, LPAs is a bit of a leitmotif there, but also, as I was touching on earlier, I recommend speak to your accountant first of all, because what you don't want to have is have an asset which qualifies for business property relief, sell it, get cash, and lose all relief. So it's get it all lined up to start off with. And then Mike, very similar one to be honest, actually. Talked about LPAs, talked about cross options, key man, updating wills. With all of these clients, there may be opportunities to do further detailed planning with wills. Are they concerned about care fees? Do you want to do asset protection? And so you don't, if you leave everything to your other half and you die first, they go into care, it's all fair games. We can protect that. If any of the children going through, they're vulnerable, perhaps they're divorcing, special needs, we can do all those steps to help them. And finally, the educational support element, I was about speaking about this the other week, Chris, weren't we? Is what we could do is they could offer their staff a free benefit by having people like us going in and speaking to the staff. The staff get free benefits, and the professionals in front of people as well. So that's the sort of things to consider, I think.
Yeah, I think supporting people, supporting employees through this period with good advice is an employee benefit that actually is really valuable. So it's an interesting one, and thanks for that, Ian. That was really, really useful. So a couple of things that I just wanted to highlight. Certainly everything everybody said makes perfect sense, but this is based, and typically these case studies are based on work I'm doing on that particular month, because it just makes my life easier if I can reference it to something that's happening in reality. So I've got a client at the minute, younger couple of guys run a recruitment business. They put life cover in place to make sure that the business had enough money to buy the shares. And what they hadn't done is put trust in place. So that money would have hit their estate as opposed to hit the other directors of the business. And they didn't have any cross option agreement in place. So actually the life cover would have gone to the estate as opposed to the fellow directors to buy the business. And I think it's really important that there's two elements effectively. Number one is the element of protecting your fellow shareholders and making sure that they've got enough financial assets to buy the other shares in the event of anybody's death, but also the setup. So we'd always recommend that people use a business trust over a personal trust. Why would we do that? There's been case law that says that using personal trusts for business protection, shareholder protection, can create a reservation of benefit. So it then creates issues in terms of inheritance tax planning. So you've got to be sort of super careful on that. But I think the biggest mistake people make is just saying, I've got the life cover in play. Okay, cool. Who does it go to? Well, it goes to my wife. Great. Where do the shares go to? Goes to my wife. Not good, because it defeats the object of what that arrangement's meant to do. So we're doing a bit of with that particular recruitment business, we're doing a bit of unpicking at the minute to make sure that the arrangement is fit for purpose. And I'd always separate that shareholder protection from key man. So who are the key employees in the business where the business would suffer? And again, this has probably changed over the last 6 months, but where the business would suffer. And also what would happen in terms of that might be the directors, but there might be other key individuals in the business. One really important point: key man can be tax relievable. So if you put key man insurance policies in place, you get tax relief on it, but not for the directors. So it's only individuals where it's only an employer-employee relationship. So it's really important when you're looking at tax relief for life insurance premiums, if you're putting it in place to protect the key individuals in your business, you don't claim tax relief for directors. Because that won't be seen as an allowable business expense. So again, when I write these, it's based on sort of work that I'm doing from at the minute and helping and supporting people. But the idea is that there are enough gaps for us to all fill them as we go through part of the conversation. But what I'm going to talk about now is the risks. So I want to talk about the challenges they face if they don't take action. And on that note, let's go to Asari. What do you reckon they'll do if they don't do anything?
If they don't do anything, there's a possibility that the business will go bust. I think the most obvious one, because income massively dropped and they've got a huge staff liability. If the staff aren't working and the income's dropped off massively, then they've got a real problem. And they are taking out a lot of money for their personal finances. If they just continue like that and do nothing, then the chances are that the business won't be able to sustain that that level of withdrawal. So doing nothing is like disaster, really, isn't it? It looks like disaster, although there's a possibility that the economy can recover and all the rest of it, but it doesn't look like things are going to change as quickly as most people thought. So doing nothing, I don't think it's just going to recover, in the next 3 months or something.
Well, the other challenge you've got, and again, it doesn't say it in the case study, which is my fault because I wrote it, but how much cash have they got in the bank? What's their period of survivability if they do nothing? And if there's new productions in play in terms of how long does it take for them to get paid? Because it might be 18 months, mightn't it?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And also, things like bounce back loans, they've got other options there, although given the cash they're taking out and other factors, that doesn't seem to be a great idea. But it's something to still mention, that they could get because the finance on that bounce back loan is so good that pay it off over 7 years, no payment until next year. It's almost like virtually free cash in the short term. So if there was a reason to keep the staff going and they could see a future, that could be an option as well. But yeah, I think doing nothing. I think we all agree doing nothing is almost like let's waiting to train to hit the buffer, isn't it? They've got to do something because the business is changing in front of them anyway. So
what additional risks would you highlight, Asari?
Yeah, it's just the main risk is running out of money. Obviously, staff might start leaving. That's the other thing. If you don't make a decision, staff can see the obvious. There's some people that, it's kind of be careful what you wish for. There's people who I've seen on the different debates over the months saying, oh, it's great working from home. I think we should just furlough the whole country. Depends on what your perspective is. If you're being furloughed, you might say, yeah, furlough me for a year.
You know what? It's an interesting one because I think there's an argument so we've stopped again now because we're in sort of a tier 2 area, but we were inviting clients back into the office to do meetings that were socially distanced. And we were having some face ones outside and stuff like that, only because I just needed some human contact. So I don't know whether we're going to turn into a culture of people who are just sitting on their laptops all day, or whether people actually like the human dynamic. What do you think?
Yeah, because I don't think they will. I've worked from home for 20 years, but for the first 11 years, I was at the Audit Commission, where I loved the fact that every so often I knew I'd be on site at a council, interviewing people, seeing people all day. We might stay in a hotel depending where it was. And then I would go into the office and we'd do our feedback. I could meet up with some friends, have a bit of lunch, and then I could be back again working from home. But
that's balance, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? As opposed to
because my children were young then, and therefore the school run and all that, I loved all that. But if they said to me, right, we're making a decision, we're getting rid of the office, and there's no, we're going to do everything virtual, I would have had to consider whether I'm really happy with that. I would have found can be very, very lonely, because I was at home on my own most of that time. And what made it work is I did have the balance, because I love having the radio on, watching a bit of cricket in the Caribbean, and all that opportunity I can do. That's fantastic. But you can soon get bored of that. If you're literally doing it every day in day in, day out with nobody to meet. I think that trend won't be as simple as everybody thinks it will be.
Yeah, I agree. I think balance is going to be key, and it's that maintaining that staff motivation might be a challenge, might it, for a lot. Ian, what do you think there? What if you were sitting down with these 4 directors? What risks would you be highlighting?
I won't go back over what I've already done. I want to pick up this time on the choices that they've got, and the main risk therefore is losing someone that can actually take over the management of the business for when they decide to exit. They've obviously got some people in relatively senior positions, and this is where looking at that structural review, well, if Mike is going to be the first one to go, who do we need to replace Mike? Or can the other three cover for Mike if someone else takes on some of the responsibilities that they're going to need to let go? So again, it's all about balancing in this. Motivation doesn't just come from money, it doesn't just come from benefits. A lot of the time it comes from recognition, and being recognized to be able to step up is one of the real key ones for me. And being able to provide the resources for them to get the additional technical knowledge if that's what they need, having them mentored or shadowed by one of the existing directors, again, invaluable. So all of these things are there, and they can actually risk their future and the future income if they don't get it right.
I think that's probably a fair point, actually. I mean, you talk about that. I mean, like clearly they've run the business as theirs for a number of years, but then are they motivated people to take over if they're just me? And that might be a challenge, mightn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the worst thing that we suffer is giving over something that's been something that we've been in control of, because the thing you fear is it not going right.
Yeah.
You fear the failure. You don't necessarily fear the change, you fear the failure. And as you know, as much as we all want people to succeed, there is always that fear. So the only thing you can do is give them as much time as you can and much opportunity as you can, and see if there is someone that you're right, and there's someone inside the business that can take over. If not, then the exit via sale then probably is a better avenue.
Yeah. I suppose the other challenge you've got with exit via sale, and it's one we've talked about with our clients, is that, as Asari was saying earlier, the ethical obligation you've got for your team. I've got a mate who's just sold his financial planning business up north, and I was chatting to him about it, and he said, I said no to more money, and it wasn't a huge amount, but I said no to more money because of the fact that I knew that the business that I eventually sold to was going to be the right home. Now, as you say, it's not all about the money. It's also about making judgments that are right for people. But I thought that was an interesting comment from you. Sharon, what were your thoughts in terms of the challenges this business faces?
So I'd almost go back a step. I'd make sure that we have a clear definition of what roles they play in the business, because at the moment the risk is we're not sure what roles they play in the business. We're talking about them exiting. Does the business just implode on itself if they exit? Are there some stable cornerstones? Getting a clear view on their financial position. So getting some management accounts in place. Even looking at forecasts, saying, okay, if we're going to lose 50% of this stream of income, what shape does this take going forward? Looking at cash flow, because if they are, I think as somebody mentioned, if they are going to run out of cash, let's know when they're going to run out of cash. Let's plan for that eventuality and possibly head it off at the pass. Their personal positions then is another risk. They've been taking a lot of money out of the business, but what have they done with it? Are they in a position to say, well, actually, for the protection of the business so that we can sell something viable going forward, do we take a bit less? How long, if their pensions have been paid into for a couple of years, that's one thing. If their pensions have been paid in for the last 15, 20 years, maybe we could stop the pension payments for a little while. There's so many options.
I mean, bear in mind as well that they're taking out 110 in addition to the pension contribution. So, I mean, it certainly depends on their lifestyle, doesn't it? But you'd hope they'd have a bit of savings.
You'd like
you'd hope, but who knows?
You'd like to think, but you never know with people, do you?
No.
I worked with an A-lister who, if you listen to the papers, he is a multi-millionaire and actually lives a multi-millionaire lifestyle, but quite frankly, he hasn't got a pot to.
Yeah.
Because he lives the lifestyle.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there's a really good book. I don't know if I've got it. No, I haven't got it on my bookshelf in the office. It's at home, called The Millionaire Next Door. And certainly most of our clients are like this archetype. And it talks about the fact that they wanted to do this piece of survey work in America. So what they did is they did like an open day. They put caviar and champagne out and stuff like that, and invited a bunch of people along who were millionaires, who were cash millionaires. They had money in the bank, and they ignored the champagne and caviar and went for the beer and sandwiches. And it was interesting because one of the researchers went to them and said, well, hold on, why are you ignoring all this really posh, expensive food? And the guy turned around and said, the reason I'm a millionaire is because I make really good spending decisions. And one of them is I don't need champagne and caviar when I've got beer and sandwiches. And typically, it's really worth reading The Millionaire Next Door because it gives you, it puts paid to some of those perceptions of wealth. Because I don't think what we sometimes perceive as rich, that lifestyle, those people are particularly rich. And there's I've got a client, I've got a friend of mine who works primarily with footballers. And again, footballers are the worst in having to show this rich lifestyle, but actually don't make good financial decisions that well. It's interesting.
100%.
Can I interject now? Sorry, Sharon.
Go on, Steve.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we haven't established yet whether it's a limited company or not, and that makes a big difference when you're advising directors of a limited company because they've got legal obligations and responsibilities anyway. The three things that I would highlight with the directors also, depending on the circumstance of how serious the financial position is there's three what they call antecedent transactions. One is preferences, one is transactions at undervalue, and the third one is misfeasance. Now, they could be prosecuted under any of those three if suddenly they become desperate and they start selling assets, or transferring assets out away from the business to connected parties or whatever, right? The other thing is obviously transactions at undervalue, selling assets that are an undervalue, and therefore the valuation is important. That if they are considering selling an asset in business, whether it's a vehicle or whatever, they should get an independent valuation so that they're covered under that situation. I went on about the bank account because I don't know if all of you are aware of this. I'm sure some of you will be, but there's going to be a serious law change on the 1st of December. So we're not talking about a long time of now, where HMRC are going to become secondary preferential creditors, right? Rather than ordinary creditors, they're going to go up the list. So if one of these directors or any of the directors have got personal guarantees to the bank under a bank overdraft or whatever, and they're relying on the debenture that they granted to the bank's not going to get their money back. They'll be coming after those guarantors, right? If the company did fold, HMRC will become, other than the staff for wages and holiday pay, then HMRC will come next, bite of the cherry.
Steve, just give clarity of order on that. Secured creditors come first, don't they?
No. At this moment in time, the only preferential creditors, right? The only preferential creditors are for staff for wages and holiday pay.
That's preferential creditors, but
Yes.
sorry,
Yeah.
let me be clear. And creditors where there's an asset secured in the business
Yes.
are always first, aren't they?
Yes, yes. Yeah, for
And then
specific
preferential
assets.
creditors are second.
Yes, correct. Correct. For certain assets. But as I said, the bank normally would have a debenture, but they would only have a floating charge over the certain assets.
I understand that.
We're talking about the fixed charge.
Yeah.
And therefore, there is a danger there that if they're relying on, a lot of people in our profession are already talking to clients that if they are in serious difficulty, they may wish to wind up their business before the 30th of November, right? Because it's going to make a serious difficulty if there is a shortfall to the bank, and the bank's going to look to the guarantor.
I wasn't aware of that, Steve, so that's really useful. I didn't realise.
Sorry?
It could be a whole lot worse. I've just been dealing with a client who his previous accountant managed to allow his limited company to be struck off. He thought he had the house in his name. It's turned out as they've gone to sell the house that the house is actually in the business name. And the people he's selling to, effectively the buyer solicitor, have pointed this out to say, well, hold on a minute, how can you sell this house? It belongs to a liquidated company, so now currently belongs to the Queen, effectively. And we've had a real mission with Companies House to get this property back, effectively, and get the company put back onto Companies House register.
Was Sharon, so the company owned the house and he was living in it rent-free?
No, he wasn't living in it, he was renting it out and getting income from it. So it just gets worse. Okay. Then there was a flood, so the property is now being empty and he's been renovating it. He's now decided he doesn't want the headache, he wants to sell it. And obviously he can't sell it because right now he doesn't own it. Well, it's working its way through, and Companies House have now agreed, with some fiery hoops he's got to jump through, that they will reinstate the company, which then at least he can proceed with the sale. His view is, I'm going to lose my buyer. I need this to happen quickly. Companies House are saying, well, you're just going to have to wait. We're dealing with the paperwork as soon as we can. And if he loses his buyer, what can I say? I'm sorry. This was a bloody stupid mess to get into.
Steve, there was a couple of things that you pointed out. I think there's a couple of additional elements as well. I suppose if the company gets into trouble, you've also got to think about, if they don't take action to turn it around now and they carry on running it, knowing that it can't continue, that's potentially wrongful trading.
Wrongful trading as well.
Then they're in a position where their personal assets might be liable. So that's one potential risk of not taking action. I suppose the other one is deliberate deprivation of the company assets on the pension side. So if they've been taking out 40 grand a year and the company hasn't been able to afford it or can't afford it in the future, the HMRC can say, look, you shouldn't have taken those contributions out of the business.
A liquidator has got very strong powers to investigate anyway, but that is certainly a scenario that could be. And then he would, the liquidator, if one is appointed, would be asking them to repay the company if their pension funds are being overpaid,
Potentially. But that, I mean, thankfully, like the case study at the minute, it's still early days and they can still take action. But certainly, as you said earlier on, we don't know how long the service of the employees in question, so there might be a redundancy cost that they need to think about as well. Demi, what were your thoughts in terms of the risks? Oh, I've lost Demi. Ian, where?
Sorry, I was on mute.
That's all right, mate.
I was talking. Yeah, Steve, thanks for that information. I think that's something that I need to really look into, because it sort of clouded me with me thinking about the whole thing here. Not this one, as we've said, this is early stages, but just a broader sense of talking to clients. There's going to be
Steve, have you got a link to where that's announced? Because I've got to be honest, I haven't called that.
I think
can you share that in the notes?
I'll dig it out for you. I think it's the Finance Act 2020.
Yeah, I'd heard something previously, and it had kind of gone. It just floated, and then you've now mentioned it, I'm thinking, crikey, this is important stuff.
It really is important stuff, because there's a lot of directors out there that are relying on that, the bank being able to recover their money and release them from their guarantee.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I suppose the other thing is that you're in a position where they might, as you say, they might owe staff money, owe pension contributions and owe holiday pay, but their tax bill might be a decent sized liability, mightn't it? That they've got to pay for any other credit.
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Sharon. Appreciate that. I'll have a look at that.
I'll send it on to you.
Yeah, cool. Dan, what were the other elements in terms of risks, do you think?
Risks is I'm reading the paragraphs which seem to indicate that they've been sort of burying their heads in the sand, these four. Not really been talking. I don't know if that's been luck, judgment, avoidance, but they really do need. They're really in danger that if they start uncovering things that they really are far apart on agreeing, there could be a real problem for them. So I think the sooner that they start talking about what they each want in terms of exit, not exit, how they see the business going. Yeah, and they have got very, very different demands on their lives, very different circumstances. So I think that for me has got to be the starting point. Anything else you try and do, that those differences are just going to resurface. Maybe you have a strategy, maybe they all agree with it, and then all of a sudden in 3 months, someone says, "No, I just can't go along with this," and you're back to square one.
Sharon, I don't think we're onboarding this client in 3 months, are we? Definitely not. This might be a year's relationship management job before we.
The know your client form could take 3 months to complete the
True. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that, mate. Ian, what were your thoughts about the risk they're taking?
Is that me or Adrian?
Ian Wayne still.
Okay. I'm looking more the personal angle, apart from the touching on earlier on with Mike, for example, with his health issues, power of attorney. His co-directors could be at risk if something happens to him. So I think they need to look at that. And bearing in mind, once a power of attorney has been signed by all parties, it takes about 3 months to register it. That's before COVID. It's taking longer now. So something to get on with. In the meantime, they could look at doing what's called general powers, which are documents. I don't like them that much, but they work. They plug a gap. So basically, you appoint someone to look after financial affairs for you, which may work in this, I don't know. But it ceases if you lose mental faculties. So it can be a stopgap. Also,
sorry, can I ask a question on that then?
Yeah.
So can they use general powers to give the fellow directors authority within the business to make those decisions that they don't want to get involved with? Or
honest answer, not sure. Not sure.
Okay.
It is a general power that gives people financial authority. Now, logically, yes, but I need to check that one point.
Okay.
So if I was advised, I'd say, well, let's look into this and may be able to do this. Let's crack on with LPAs. Likewise, see what happens, what they can do with their interest in the business as well. Very important to look into. On individual levels, Viv and Nell, they've got a child. We don't know if they've got wills. And also, we don't know if they're married to each other. Is it first time or second time? Things like that we need to look into. If they don't have a wills, then the laws of necessity will apply.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think, well, it'll all go to each other. Well, not necessarily. And bearing in mind these assets, what would happen is that, let's say Viv died first, Neil will get all of her personal belongings, all jointly held assets, but not necessarily the house, depends how it's held. Then a further £270,000, got up from 250 last year, good. And then half the balance. Everything else goes to child who will get it at 18. Now, normally we'd want to protect the assets a bit longer. So by doing even a basic will, they can avoid the rules of necessity applying. And clearly that applies, for example, like with Rick. If he doesn't have a will, well, mum's going to inherit, which may not be ideal. And then after that, if it depends on cousins or aunts, nephews, if it's just him, it goes to the crown. So I think with Viv and Neil, is certainly the will. If they don't do it, they've got a problem about what happens to their assets, who's going to look after the child, because no one's been appointed guardians, or perhaps they have. Likewise, powers of attorney, as mentioned earlier. And also, if they just decide to exit fairly quickly, there's lots of other issues we talked about earlier on. So with Mike, sorry, yeah.
I suppose the other thing as well is each of the directors have got pensions. We don't know whether they're nominated beneficiaries on the pensions, and you'd rather do that to know that where that money was going, because otherwise it's down to the trustees, isn't it?
Yeah, and I would say to clients, I will do the fact find to find out what assets they got. Do you have pensions? Have reviewed it recently? If not, let's see somebody.
Yeah.
And also death and service or life policies. And like you're saying earlier on, but more on a personal angle, I'll still get some clients like got death and service payable to them or their estate. So let's get it trust, nominate, sign either the other half, or set up a pilot trust, for example.
You know what, Demi will tell you this as well, Ian. The amount of life policies where we take on new clients where they've done some bits in the past, but it hasn't been done particularly thoroughly, where the simple stuff, like nominate beneficiaries for your workplace pension, like we're not even dealing with it, but let's make sure that it goes to the right place. And nominating beneficiaries for life policies you've got in place isn't done. It's scary.
It's quite common, isn't it, actually?
Yeah.
With Mike, again, well, clearly, again, check where he is, wills-wise and so forth. If he doesn't, the same situation arises, really. But here we've got a bit of a warning shot. He's already had the health issues. So a lot of them are very, very similar, to be honest, actually. With Rick, again, I suggest very strongly that getting mum seen by a solicitor as soon as possible. If Rick called me and says, I want to do a will for mum, my normal point is, well, actually, as you probably know, only she can do that.
Yeah.
And they quite often get the question, oh, I know, mum's asked me to call, or, oh, is that right? We're always looking out for the ones trying to get behind the curtain, by the way. And so with mum, as she is now, we've got a problem time-wise. She's 85, health deteriorating. I personally would want to liaise with the doctor, get the doctor to confirm whether they think
capacity.
Yeah. Then, of course, it's still a legal test. It's my decision at the end of the day. And I've had it a few times where the doctor said they've got capacity, and when I see them that day, they can't really advise me. So I go back the next day or so forth. But
I suppose the challenge you've got, Ian, as well is dementia's not a binary thing, is it? It's a gradient. So how do you judge where they are on that sort of gradual potential decline?
Certainly, and capacity itself isn't a one side. It's continuous. You might be okay now, might not be okay tomorrow. They might have strong meds today, they're better in the afternoons.
Yeah.
How about if she can't communicate?
Yeah. I'm 43 and my mornings are already better than my afternoons, to be honest. I should be worried, really. Thank you, appreciate that. Friday, what were your thoughts about the risks if they don't come and have a conversation with you?
Definitely, yes. I mean, I think a lot of you guys explained that, how key planning is for any businesses to succeed. Now, when you look at your own life, you're likely to spend more time planning your annual or 2-week holidays than you spend time looking at planning your later life, really. Now, risk here is if you don't take stock of where you are at the moment, particularly where you're looking at Mike, his health could be deteriorating. So that's something that should be taken into the equation moving forward. What does he want to do with it? How can he improve it? They're basically taking responsibility for it. Now, when we talk about planning, there are different components to any business plan. Likewise, in life as well, there are so many different aspects of your life that needs to take into consideration, because the life you've led will no longer be there. We know that, the previous life in COVID doesn't exist anymore. So it's a perfect analogy that moving forward, and Sari has mentioned that, when you're working from home, he's got something to do in business, but when he hasn't got a business, what could he be doing? I mean, it could be isolation, could be boredom. And if you don't plan to fill your life up with something purposeful and satisfying, you could be heading for areas where your time and your effort and energy is being called upon by good intention people around you. Or you're at home, you've got time, can you do something for me? And you willingly do that. And you do it for other people and other reasons, and you lose track of what you're doing. So you live in a chaotic life of trying to fulfill other people's needs. You're at a time in your life when you can decide how you want to lead the next phase of your life. And unless you put plans into place with aspirations or what things that you wanted to do, but never got around to it because of the lifestyle you chose one way or another. Now you've got an opportunity to readdress that, rephrase it, and perhaps create something that you've always wanted to do. Maybe follow a passion that you didn't have time for. Maybe go and travel, which you didn't have time for because you're so intense in your business. Again, relationship-wise, 35 years in a business, you formed a relationship with your co-directors, with your clients, your production team, and all your suppliers. Now, that was something that kept you satisfied in terms of your personal interaction, social needs. When you step out of that scenario, particularly when you're looking at Rick, he's only got his mum. Who is he going to replace with all those things that he used to, all those people who used to stimulate him? Will he have time when he becomes a full-time carer? So these kind of things need to be thought through and addressed and have some sort of a strategy ahead that, look, when I retire, I'm going to try and socialize and find somebody with similar interests to me, on top of looking after looking after mum's needs as well. Again, like you said, Chris, before, that, this is a sandwich generation. You have to look after yourself. Some of these directors have got their children, and some of them have got parents in need. So, you're in between. You have to satisfy their needs, your own personal needs, and also your parents' generation's needs. And the danger here is, particularly if your health starts deteriorating, then it compromises your lifestyle. Because then you end up being your own full-time carer, and you're chasing around looking at, when's your next consultant's appointment, or when are you next popping your pill type of thing. And that can quite easily happen if you don't check your health at this point in time. Most of us are in reasonably good health at this stage. Some of us have let ourselves go out because, our waistline has increased over the COVID period. And these are clear signs that, changes are taking place. And unless you take responsibility for your well-being and check your waistline, not from interrogation purpose, but should make sure that you're in reasonably good health. So planning is essential, and there's a lot of things to consider. Risk is, if you don't plan, you're heading for a life of chasing around.
So I suppose there's two things that I'd ask on that, Pradeep. Number one was a bit more flippant, because I think I know what Asari would do. He'd just spend more time watching cricket. He's right. I'm right. But secondly, I think the interesting thing is and I'll give you an example of a client I saw yesterday. I'm sitting down with this client, and we all know that the world is a volatile place at the minute, and COVID's happening and stuff like that. But what we're talking about in terms of planning for this client who's 58 is a 40-year window of his life. His life expectancy is easily into the 90s and potentially a lot longer. And how do you, when you work with clients, make sure that we're not only looking at tomorrow, but they're also looking at their future, in particular with health and the fact that sustaining good quality health then improves quality of life longer term?
Well, it's interesting, Pradeep. I mean, I wouldn't just blame COVID on expanding waistlines. I think expanding waistlines have been happening for quite a few decades.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
it's
true.
interesting when you look at school photographs, as I do sometimes, from the 60s and 70s, the younger people, just picking on them for the moment, they all seem much leaner. And I think whilst COVID has highlighted it, I think the problem's been bubbling under for some time.
Yeah. I think quite right, Dimitris, what you mentioned is because the lifestyle we led, we were also quite active. We were doing things, maybe playing cricket or something like that, football. Certainly I did that, when I had a lot more hair on. But, certainly the COVID has highlighted exactly what you said, that, because of the situation we're in, we could let ourselves go purely, maybe because of boredom, because you're at home so much, 24/7 is a long time to handle. And also spending that kind of time with your other half can rise up some firecrackers as well. So it's recognizing all these things. And it takes a toll on your well-being and the way you think as well, and how you perform. And it impacts on your decision-making in your business if you're still running a business. Because when you start flagging behind and not making the right decision, which you could have been pretty sharp on before, there is something that's underlaying, that's playing under for you. But, Chris, you mentioned, for somebody at the age of 58, it's a wonderful window. 40 years is amazing. Now, most of us in the generation that we're talking about here, age profile from 55 to 65, we still have a window, maybe another 5, 10, 15, 20 years ahead of us. That's really, in essence, a new lease of life, that you could live your life where you missed out on certain things and fill it up with something purposeful. But unless you sit down and think what you missed out on, or your aspiration that you had, when you were a little kid, you wanted to do things. Maybe you wanted to be a fireman Sam or be an astronaut or something. But you also had other things under thinking, because we were creative at that time. We were very impressionable. Then life took over. We went to university. We had a new friend. We started complying with their rules and regulations, peer pressure. You go into a career and bang, your life takes over for the next 20, 25, 30 years. And then you come to an abrupt halt and you think, Jesus, that was a hell-raising ride. What do I do now? Because you've got your foot off the pedal now. Now you decide with that pedal, how much power you want to exert to drive yourself in the next phase of your life. And that again needs to consider a lot of things. Your health is one of those things. More important is, as you're aging, you have to think about the implications of aging process, because we're not going to be around for too long. And that question about immortality, I'm still feeling 21, I'm still 21. You have to start questioning, yes, how 21 and how long for as well. It's a good state to be in, because you're still feeling young and fresh, but your body will tell you something else. So it's taking that into account. And again, taking example of Rick, he's got a perfect example of an aging mother. When he reaches that age, what is he going to do? How is he going to manage that part of it as well? So he's thinking ahead, but also not scaring the hell out of yourself, but plan ahead. So you got things in place, you got care in place, perhaps, or maybe you got another relationship of somebody who could care for you for your basic needs until you're not able to do things. So your independence is very important in that window ahead of you, to maintain it, as much as you can before you become, being cared for, basically, and you become dependent on others.
Could I mention something? I just want to mention, it's interesting because the conversation, because I've added a section. I've got during COVID, it was a good chance to review stuff, wasn't it? And one of the booklets I did was a business planning booklet, and I wanted it to be more professional, looking more better designed. And I thought, actually, I need to add, I looked at what other people did in Action Coach, and one of the sections I added was a page on personal. And it's got now wealth, health, and those kind of questions on it, just to ask relationships and that. And I never used to really bother with those, apart from when I first met them. But now every 3 months, I want them to fill something in on there. They often don't want to do it. And I say to them, no, this is the most important page, because actually this is why you're doing what you do, right? So I just want you to reflect on each of those questions, and just all I say to them is reflect on it, and just say to yourself, out of 10, how do you feel you are against each of those questions? And that, as you said, relationship in that is really good. And the other one, just to finish, is Marshall Goldsmith. He's supposed to be the world's #1 executive coach. He says all his clients, he's got all these top 100 multi-millionaire CEOs in America, and he asked them to ask themselves every day 6 questions, and a couple of them are happiness and relationship. How engaged were you? And I thought that was great, because the first 2 are sort of goals, and yeah, that's fine. They're brilliant at that. These guys are successful people, right? But the one about happiness and how engaged were you at home and at work is the 2 most challenging questions that those CEOs have, because some of them haven't even thought the word happiness. So they just think success.
Yeah, I mean that purpose is an interesting question, because what's the point, isn't it? Is the point is just to make as much money as possible? No, the point is to live a life that's full of joy. That's what it should be. Sorry, I'd be really interested in your thoughts on our white paper, because that's what we explore.
Yeah, I'd want to have a look at that.
We explore, and the framework we've used, and there's a bunch of different stuff you can do. I really like, I don't know if you've seen the Wheel of Life.
Like that.
Those sort of that. I like that. The framework we use at Cervello, or I use with my clients at Cervello, is based on a book called Well-Being, the 5 Essential Elements. And it's by a guy called Jim Rath, and Rath and Harter, R-A-T-H. HARTER. And those 5 essential elements are financial, family, financial, physical, I've lost my train of thought now. Career, so how is work? Are you enjoying work? Community, and friends and family. They're your 5. And actually, if you're judging yourself on just financial and career, I'm not convinced that you're making the right decisions for your own life.
Absolutely not.
I mean,
So give that a read. I'd be interested to know what you think.
I've written that book down, actually. Do you remember the story of the billionaire? There was a guy, but I don't remember what his name was. I never wrote the name down. There was a billionaire about 3 years ago that allegedly was in the news in America, that allegedly was trying to get his daughter to go to bed. She was 8 years old, and she said she was being very difficult. No, I'm not going to bed, and blah, blah, blah. And he got really angry with her. And she went away and got a piece of paper and came back and said, "These are all the dates in my life. You weren't there." Right. And he apparently he resigned from his business. He said, that's it. He resigned overnight from his business. But I'd love to know, to go back and find out if that guy has gone back. Because as you said, once people leave, Marshall Goldsmith says this all the time, that all the CEOs say to him, they can't wait to retire and play golf. And he says to all of them, it's bullshit. Because as soon as you retire, you're going to be bored senseless. Yeah. You know, 1 minute you were running a global company, and then tomorrow you're on a golf course, you're going to feel bored. And he always challenges them around it.
Well, so I think some of the people who end up on the golf course do it because they need company, somewhere to spend time.
Something to, yeah.
Or to stay away from the other half.
So it's really interesting. I've got a client who came to us, he inherited some money. So he had a decent financial backing already, but he also inherited about 300 grand. So he said, look, I've inherited this money. This is my chance now, my pivot to decide what I'm going to do next to my life. And we did his cash flow. So our version of what Sharon does is with people's personal finances. So we build a plan to say, either you're never going to run out of money again, or there's a gap that we need to fill before we get to that point. But this inheritance, together with his existing provisions, meant that it would never run out of money again. So we took him on last year, did all the work, got an email from him 2 months into the onboarding process. He said, right, I'll put my notice in. I was like, okay, great. Let's have a little talk about what, and we sent emails back and forth for about 9 months. Then COVID hit, and he emailed me, because we've been communicating with our clients consistently. He emailed me 2 months in and said, look, I want to come in and see you now the office is back open. And I said, fine. Sat down with him. He went, I've gone back to work. So, okay. Doing what? Exactly the same job at exactly the same firm. And it was like, why? He said, well, I need to think a bit more about that transition, moving towards what I'm going to spend my time doing. But the fact that I know that I can stop at any time means that work's not a chore anymore. And that's interesting, isn't it?
It's a philosophical shift.
Yeah, knowing that you've got enough money, that work doesn't become an obligation, it becomes then an opportunity. And I think that's really interesting.
I think one of the things that we sort of look at here as an opportunity is that, we talk about this kind of situation in life, where it gives you a chance to review things. And what I like to call it is a midlife review. Now, it could be from anywhere, even from Chris's age to,
Thank you, Pradeep. I appreciate the acknowledgement.
And I think it's an ongoing process. It's not something you do it once and then that's it, put to bed thinking I've washed my hands and done it. But, it's an ongoing process to review. It's something that I taught my children from when they were teenagers to, at the end of the year, before 1st of January, we used to sit down at the dining table and do a time plan, or where they came from at the age of 10 to what they've been achieved in school, in sports. And then we project and say, right, what would you want to do in the next 12 months' time, or maybe in 2 years' time? Now, that has actually paid dividends for them, because as soon as they got hold of the principle, that tool, they started applying it themselves. When they were leaving school, they decided what they wanted to do in university and aspiration into careers. And they chose And that was the key thing. They chose what they wanted to do. They decided not to follow the mainstream people who have been doing the same thing in the career. And where they are today is because of their own decision making.
Yes, well.
And for our generation, it used to take maybe 7 to 10 years to change careers or even jobs. These guys in 5 years have changed 5 jobs and they've moved up the ranks very quickly. So we're living in a very dynamic world, which brings into question our generation. You know, we are still moving in a changing world. So that change is at breakneck speed. Even though with COVID lockdown, things have slowed down, but technology is changing. We have to evolve quickly. The National Health Service is changing. We have to evolve. You can't go and pick up the phone every time your cough and sneeze to go and see your GP. You can't run to the shops every so often, well, you know, within reason anyway. You can't run off to the pub because you can't stand her indoors at the moment. You can't do these things. So, you know, changes are inevitable. And when you start thinking and choosing your own way of life, then something that, Sari, you mentioned in your key topics, happiness, to different people means different things. Somebody might say, yeah, you know, I'm busy with my work, I'm happy with my work, that's my happiness. To others, it may be the golf course, being happy there. But happiness can also change. You know, it's a state of mind. It's also more of an emotion at any point in time. If somebody upsets you, you're going to say, I'm not happy. If something didn't work, I'm not happy. So how do you define happiness?
Yeah,
Happiness becomes a state of being. So you take all the rough and tumble of life and you still maintain that state of happiness and being.
I mean, you could also argue that happiness is often internal, isn't it? So you've got external factors that you can make changes on, but how much is your attitude dependent on your own happiness?
Well, often the case is, you know, like the present session we're in, you can't change the external situation because of the pressure of COVID and all the rules and regulations that are coming, where you can go, where you can't go, when you can go, when you can't go. A lot of it is what I like to call it, it's an internal job.
Yeah.
Whatever is outside is how you respond to it rather than how you react to it. And in this particular situation, you know, you've got choices to make about your business and the life ahead, you've got your responsibility ahead. It's your response to all these things that you identify. And when you start making decisions, they're more likely to happen if you don't make a decision. And sometimes when you don't make a decision, you've still chosen not to choose, which means things will start happening and you're kicking yourself silly. Why didn't I decide earlier?
So one thing, thank you for that, Friday. That's amazingly useful. One thing I just wanted to highlight, and this is something we share with all our clients who are approaching that period of life. I've just put in the notes. So there's a tool that the Office of National Statistics use called "How long does my pension need to last?" So when I'm sitting down with a client at the age of 58, his average life expectancy is going to be 86, but he's got a 1 in 4 chance of reaching 94. So that's a decently long period of time. And bear in mind that these are based on UK nationwide statistics. So if you're in the Southeast and you're slightly wealthier, you're in a position where that's likely to be slightly higher. So that framework, how long are we planning for? Well, you know, how many people have got the perception that they'll give up work in 5 years' time, they will stop? You know, the reality is that doesn't happen anymore. You've got to think about longer term planning. Just want to do a quick, with super short time. I mean, it's been a really good discussion this month. Before I go around the room, just talk about the one small action you'd recommend these partners, these directors take next. Just a one-liner would be amazing. Russ records these, and you've probably seen them pop up on LinkedIn. Now, I know that there shouldn't be any issues about anybody being on these or anything. If there's any, if you've got any reason why you don't want to be involved, Russ will kill me for saying this, but let us know and we can edit you out. But as long as you're okay and you don't email me to say you don't want to be on LinkedIn, we'll assume you do. That's number one. And then number two is, let's go around the room. And what I'm interested in is that first step. I'm not interested in all the actions they need to take. I'm interested in that really small first step. Sharon, what first step would you take with these partners?
Get a grip on their financials.
Yeah, perfect. Asari, first step.
I would say plan a virtual away day if they can't do it in person, and get all of us in the room, and or in different stages, and just do an a review.
Yeah, perfect. Demi.
Ditto, a virtual away day, but preferably a socially distanced face-to-face, and then individually follow up. And that could be, I'm okay with that being virtual, but I really would like the group thing to be, if we can somehow do it together, and then we go from there. Keep an open mind.
Yeah, no, I like that. There is a different dynamic when you're face to face, right? You know, it does change the dynamic a bit. Steve, first step.
It's really already been covered, but they should meet up and discuss openly between them all of what they want to do going forward in the future, you know, and minute it as well.
Yeah. Data, Ian, any other offers on that?
No, I had structural and strategic review. The thing following on from that for me would then be who's going to be the next in line, who's going to be the next person to pop up, that succession plan.
So start thinking about that succession. Really good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ian, with the extra eye.
Again, the group discussion first about the business, but then separately in their groups to see their own advisors about planning their own future.
Yeah, and encourage them to find a financial planner that they can work with over the next 10, 20 years, I think is probably a good tip on there. And Pradeep.
For me, this is an internal thing. So before you go out and ask for professional help, is to take time personally and ask somebody who you know really well, and is yourself. Ask some deep searching questions of where you are and where you want to go. Have a sense of clarity, because when you ask yourself, you damn well answer it yourself, because you've got the answer, you know the know-hows, and to draw plans on what you'd like to do in your later life.
So before you go into that room, have a bit of clarity personally.
Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect. You know what? That was a really, as many of these it went off on a million different tangents, but always super useful. I've learnt loads. There's some facts that I can take back to my clients and use. Hopefully you found it was useful too. Good.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And
Thanks.
Chris, what's the protocols for following up with people after? Because there's some bits been raised today that I'd like to take off air post the meeting.
What I'm going to do, Dem, is I'll get Herv to send a collective email to everybody who's been on the call. I'll make sure that the emails are visible, and feel free to connect and do what you need to.
Thank you.
Amazing. All right, have a good day, guys. Thanks for getting involved again, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Yeah, nice to see you all.
Bye.